You put in the work every day, hours and hours, training. But think about how much more focused you'd be with a coach. Welcome to the What's Up Podcast. What's Up Podcast, where we'll explore all of your questions from climbing in the Dolomites to winning your local cycling events. This podcast is sponsored by Kyle Coaching, a results-oriented, data-driven coaching service for the working endurance athlete. Now your host, head coach of Kyle Coaching. This is Chuck Kyle.
Welcome back to the What's Up Podcast. I'm Julie, co-host alongside Chuck, and today we are diving into a piece of research that I think every single person listening should hear about. We're talking about cardiorespiratory fitness, what it is, why it matters, and what a landmark new study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine tells us about just how powerfully it predicts whether you live or die from nearly every major disease known to medicine. Joining me today is Chuck, who has been deep in the weeds on this research. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here. This is a study that genuinely stopped me in my tracks when I read it. And I think once we go through the numbers together, you'll understand why.
So before we get into the data, let's make sure everybody listening is on the same page. What exactly is cardiorespiratory fitness, and why should the average person care about it?
Great question. Cardiorespiratory fitness, or CRF as it's often abbreviated, is essentially a measure of how efficiently your heart, lungs, and circulatory system can deliver oxygen to your muscles during sustained physical effort. The gold standard for measuring it is something called VO2 max, the maximum amount of oxygen your body can use during intense exercise. But it can also be estimated through exercise tolerance tests, treadmill tests, or even questionnaires about your activity level.
And this study, tell us about the scale of it, because when I read the abstract, I had to double-check the numbers.
You're right to be impressed. This is an overview of meta-analyses, essentially a study of studies. The research team, led by Lang and colleagues at multiple international institutions, synthesized data from 199 unique cohort studies representing over 20.9 million individual observations. That is not a typo. 20.9 million. It's one of the largest bodies of evidence ever assembled on a single lifestyle-related risk factor for human health.
That is staggering. So what was the core question they were trying to answer?
The fundamental question was, does cardiorespiratory fitness predict who gets sick and who dies independently of other known risk factors? Not just does exercise correlate with health, but does your fitness level itself serve as a strong, consistent, independent predictor of morbidity and mortality across the adult population?
And the answer?
The answer was a resounding yes, across virtually every outcome they examined: all-cause mortality, cardiovascular mortality, cancer, diabetes, depression, dementia. Higher cardiorespiratory fitness was consistently and strongly associated with lower risk. And critically, these associations held up even after adjusting for age, sex, body mass index, smoking, and other major confounders.
So let's get into the mortality numbers, because I think this is where people's jaws really drop. Walk us through what they found for all-cause mortality.
All right, so when they compared people with low cardiorespiratory fitness to people with high cardiorespiratory fitness, the hazard ratio for all-cause mortality was roughly 1.70 to 1.75. That means low-fit individuals had approximately 70 to 75% higher risk of dying from any cause compared to their high-fit peers. And that's not comparing couch potatoes to elite athletes. That's comparing the bottom fitness tier to the top tier within general population samples.
70 to 75% higher risk of dying. That's not a rounding error. That's massive.
It is massive, and here's what makes it even more striking. The relationship between fitness and mortality isn't a cliff edge where you either have it or you don't. It's a dose-response curve. Every incremental improvement in cardiorespiratory fitness is associated with a meaningful reduction in risk. They observed risk reductions of around 11 to 17% per 1 MET increase in fitness, where a MET is a metabolic equivalent, a unit of exercise intensity. So even modest improvements in fitness translate into measurable reductions in mortality risk.
1 MET. For people who don't know what that means in practice, can you give us a real-world sense of it?
Sure, going from being completely sedentary to being able to walk briskly for 30 minutes a day might represent roughly 1 to 2 METs of improvement in fitness capacity. So we're not talking about training for an Ironman, we're talking about meaningful gains from relatively modest lifestyle changes.
That is such an important message. What about cardiovascular mortality specifically?
The numbers are even more dramatic. For cardiovascular disease mortality, the hazard ratio comparing low to high fitness was in the range of 1.75 to 2.0 in many of the included meta-analyses, so roughly double the risk of dying from heart disease if you are in the low fit category. And for incident cardiovascular disease, actually developing heart disease, not just dying from it, again, significantly elevated risk, often in the range of 40 to 70% higher.
Let's broaden out now. Because this study wasn't just about heart disease and mortality, right? They looked at a whole spectrum of conditions.
That's what makes this paper so comprehensive and, frankly, so important. They examined CRF as a predictor for an enormous range of health outcomes: all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease mortality, stroke, heart failure, atrial fibrillation, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, several cancers including breast, colon, and lung cancer, depression, anxiety, cognitive decline, dementia, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and even erectile dysfunction. And in nearly every single category, higher fitness was associated with meaningfully lower risk.
That list is remarkable. Let's pick a few. What about type 2 diabetes?
Type 2 diabetes is one of the clearest examples of the dose-response relationship in this data. People in the lowest fitness category had roughly 2 to 2.5 times the risk of developing type 2 diabetes compared to those in the highest fitness category. The effect sizes here are actually larger than what we typically see for dietary interventions or even some medications. And this held up across multiple meta-analyses included in the overview.
What about cancer? Because I think people intuitively connect fitness with heart health, but cancer feels like a different conversation.
It does, but the data says otherwise. For breast cancer, colon cancer, and lung cancer, low CRF was associated with substantially higher incidence, with hazard ratios often in the 1.3 to 1.7 range. The biological mechanisms are still being worked out, but researchers believe that fitness affects immune surveillance, inflammation, insulin signaling, and hormonal pathways that are all relevant to cancer biology. It's not just about your heart. Your fitness level appears to shape your whole systemic physiology.
And mental health. I want to spend a moment here because I think this is underappreciated.
Hugely underappreciated. There were multiple meta-analyses showing that lower fitness was associated with significantly higher risk of depression and anxiety. The hazard ratios were in the range of 1.5 to 1.9 for depression in low-fit versus high-fit individuals. And for cognitive decline and dementia, again, the data is striking. Low fitness was associated with meaningfully higher risk of Alzheimer's disease and all-cause dementia. So when we talk about cardiorespiratory fitness as a vital sign, we're not just talking about the heart. We're talking about the brain, the mind, and mental well-being as well.
This is the part where I want to pause and just let that sink in for listeners. We are talking about one biological attribute, how fit you are aerobically, that predicts your risk for heart disease, cancer, diabetes, depression, and dementia. Across 20 million observations.
That's exactly right. And the authors themselves note that in terms of population-level predictive power, cardiorespiratory fitness is arguably a stronger and more consistent predictor of health outcomes than many of the traditional risk factors that we routinely screen for, things like cholesterol, blood pressure, or even smoking status in some comparisons.
Let's talk about who benefits most. Does the research show different effects across sex, age groups, or clinical populations?
This is one of the really interesting dimensions of the paper. The benefits of higher CRF appear to be broadly consistent across sex and age groups. Both men and women in higher fitness categories have substantially lower risk compared to their low-fit counterparts. The relative risk reductions appear to be somewhat larger in magnitude in older populations, which actually makes intuitive sense. The older you are, the more your physiological reserve matters for surviving illness.
What about people who already have chronic disease? Is CRF still relevant for them?
Absolutely. In fact, some of the most compelling findings in this paper come from clinical populations. Among people with existing cardiovascular disease, higher CRF was associated with dramatically better survival. The same was true for people with cancer. There's a growing body of evidence captured in this overview suggesting that CRF should be measured and targeted in patients undergoing cancer treatment, cardiac rehab, and other clinical programs. It's not just a wellness metric, it's a clinically actionable variable.
This raises an important question. How is CRF currently measured in clinical practice, and should that change?
Currently, CRF is rarely measured in routine clinical practice. Most doctors don't include any formal assessment of fitness as part of a standard checkup. The authors of this paper, and many in the field, argue that this needs to change. They propose that CRF should be treated as a vital sign, right alongside blood pressure, heart rate, and body weight. And the good news is that CRF doesn't require expensive equipment to estimate. A simple 6-minute walk test, a submaximal step test, or even a brief questionnaire about physical activity can give a clinically useful signal.
I want to make sure we're not leaving listeners with a sense of fatalism here. Because I imagine someone hearing these numbers and thinking, well, I've been sedentary for years. Is it too late?
That is such a critical point. The answer, emphatically from the data, is no. It is absolutely not too late. The study emphasizes the dose-response nature of the relationship. Every step up in fitness provides additional protection. And importantly, fitness is highly modifiable, unlike your genetics or your age. Multiple randomized controlled trials show that structured exercise programs can improve CRF measurably within weeks to months. And when fitness improves, risk markers improve along with it.
I want to push you on the policy and public health angle now, because if this is really as strong a predictor as you're describing, why aren't we seeing CRF integrated into public health campaigns and clinical guidelines more aggressively?
It's a great question and one the paper itself raises. The authors suggest several reasons for the gap. First, measuring CRF has historically required specialized equipment or trained personnel, though as we noted, simpler estimates exist. Second, there's an ingrained focus in medicine on pharmacological solutions. It's easier to write a prescription than to counsel someone on a structured exercise program. Third, there are systemic issues around access to fitness infrastructure. Not everyone has access to a gym, a safe neighborhood to walk in, or time to exercise given socioeconomic demands.
So what do the authors recommend?
They make several strong recommendations. They call for CRF to be formally adopted as a clinical vital sign. They advocate for routine CRF assessment in primary care, particularly for populations at elevated risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. They also call for more research into what types of interventions most effectively improve CRF in different populations, and for health systems to invest in exercise medicine infrastructure the way they invest in pharmaceutical infrastructure.
There's a phrase I keep coming back to from reading this paper. They refer to low CRF as a modifiable risk factor. That framing matters, doesn't it?
It matters enormously because modifiable means actionable. This isn't like your age or your family history where you can only observe and adjust around it. Your cardiorespiratory fitness is something you can change, and the evidence says that when you change it, your disease risk changes with it. That's the extraordinary promise embedded in this data. Exercise is medicine, not metaphorically, literally, based on the evidence.
Powerful. Before we wrap up, are there limitations to the study that listeners should know about?
Always. The authors are transparent about this. Most of the included studies are observational, which means they can show association but can't fully prove causation. There's also the possibility of residual confounding. Fit people may have other healthy behaviors that contribute to their better outcomes. Additionally, the methods used to measure CRF vary across studies, which introduces some heterogeneity, and there's a relative underrepresentation of certain demographic groups, including older adults and people from lower-income countries. The authors acknowledge all of this and call for more diverse prospective research. but the consistency of findings across 199 cohort studies and more than 20 million observations is hard to dismiss.
Chuck, as we wrap up, I want to give you the floor for a final message to our listeners. Someone who's heard everything we've talked about today, what do you want them to walk away with?
I want them to walk away knowing that fitness is not just about how you look or how fast you can run. It is a fundamental biological variable that determines how long you live and how well you live. This study, with nearly 21 million observations across 199 cohort studies, is telling us something unambiguous. Your cardiorespiratory fitness is one of the most powerful predictors of your health future. And unlike your age, your genes, or your family history, you can change it. That means every walk, every bike ride, every swim, every workout session is not just something that feels good in the moment. It is a direct investment in your longevity and your quality of life. Start where you are. Start small if you need to, but start.
That's the message. Start. I love that. Chuck, this has been an extraordinary conversation. Thank you for breaking this down so clearly and so compellingly. For our listeners, we'll link to the Lang et al. 2024 paper in the British Journal of Sports Medicine in the show notes. Read it, share it, and if it moves you the way it moved both of us, go do something about it. That's all for today on the All In Podcast. I'm Judith. We'll see you next time.
You have the endurance. You have the perseverance and motivation. And now you have a coach. For more information from today's podcast, check the episode notes. If you have any questions regarding this episode, drop them in the comment section or send them on Twitter to @What'sUpPodcast or email Coach Chuck at chuck@kylecoaching.com. This is the What's Up Podcast. Till next time.